Peter Parker just spent an entire movie being forgotten by everyone he loves. And somehow, that's the most calculated thing Marvel has done to this character in over a decade. Here's what nobody's saying out loud. Tom Holland isn't on the cast list for Avengers. Doomsday, not officially, not in any confirmed capacity, and yet Brand New Day ends with the exact same marketing language Marvel used for every single Doomsday tease last December. The same fade to black, the same promise. Spider-Man will return. That phrase wasn't an accident. Marvel built an entire fourth Spider-Man movie around a hero who might not even show up in the biggest crossover of the decade, and they closed it by borrowing the visual grammar of a movie he's not confirmed to be in. So ask yourself the obvious question: why would you do that? Think about it. You don't spend 2 hours rebuilding a character's entire world, his memory, his relationships, his loneliness, just to leave him standing outside the room where the real story happened. Unless the rebuild itself was never about getting him into Doomsday, it was about getting him ready for something Doomsday can't do. Let's start with what Marvel actually did to Peter in this movie, because it's stranger than people are giving it credit for. This isn't the wisecracking teenager from Homecoming. This is a Peter Parker patrolling a city that has no idea who he is, fighting crime full-time while watching MJ and Ned quietly build lives that don't include him. That's not a plot device. That's isolation as a structural choice. Marvel took the most socially connected version of this character in franchise history and surgically removed every social connection, then asked, what does Spider-Man become when nobody's watching and nobody remembers? And then, here's where it gets interesting. They answered that question by giving him a villain who is his exact mirror. Sadie Sink's character spends most of the film as a ghost, a presence that jumps from body to body, unseen, unnamed, feared, and when the mask finally comes off, it's Jean Grey, not the confident X-Men founder from the comics, but a scared teenager searching for a sister who was taken and tortured by a government agency that saw her only as a weapon. Once you notice that, the whole movie reframes itself. Peter is chasing a villain who is lonelier than he is. He's not fighting a monster. He's fighting a reflection of what happens when isolation goes unanswered. That's not a coincidence. That's a documentary's worth of evidence sitting inside a superhero movie. Now here's the part most fans missed entirely. Damage control, the agency hunting Jean, torturing her sister, treating a scared kid like a containment problem, isn't just a Spider-Man antagonist. It's the same institutional machinery that's been quietly threaded through Thunderbolts and the Fantastic Four's arrival in this universe. Marvel keeps returning to one question across every recent film: what happens when the people in charge decide certain individuals are too dangerous to exist freely? That's not a Spider-Man theme, that's a Doomsday theme. Dr. Doom's entire ideology in the comics is built on deciding who gets to survive the multiverse and who doesn't. Marvel is rehearsing that moral conflict in a smaller, more personal arena before the Russos ask the entire Avengers roster to answer it at scale. So when Peter takes a bullet meant for Jean, when he nearly dies protecting someone damage control had already written off, that's not just character development, that's Marvel testing the emotional argument they're about to scale up to a dozen heroes and Dr. Doom. Here's the bigger reveal though, the one that actually explains the title of this video. For 4 movies, Peter Parker's defining trait was his secret. Homecoming, Far From Home, No Way Home, all of it circled around who knows Peter is Spider-Man and what happens when that secret breaks. Brand New Day ends that era completely, and it does it in the quietest way possible. Matcher doesn't learn the truth through magic or a spell unraveling. She finds a note Peter wrote years earlier. Ned doesn't need his memory restored by a telepath. He just recognizes their old handshake, and something clicks back into place naturally. Marvel had a scared, powerful telepath standing right there who could have solved this instantly, and they chose not to use her. They chose human recognition instead of magic. Why would they do that? Because Marvel is done writing Peter Parker as a secret to be protected. They're building him into someone who exists inside a network of people who know him, which is exactly the kind of hero you need walking into an ensemble war. You cannot drop a character who spends every scene hiding his identity into a movie with 30 other heroes standing shoulder to shoulder. The secret identity Spider-Man doesn't scale. The connected, known, emotionally anchored Spider-Man does. That's the reinvention. Not new powers, not a new suit, a new narrative shape, one built to survive contact with a crossover. But here's where it gets genuinely strained, and this is the connection almost nobody's talking about yet. That post-credits scene doesn't just borrow Doomsday's marketing style, it shows Ned's tracking app losing Peter's signal entirely, zooming past New York, past Earth, into open space. And that image lines up almost exactly with the ship that appeared at the end of Thunderbolts, the one carrying Reed Richards' team in from a different reality entirely. Two separate movies, both ending with something crossing a boundary that shouldn't be crossable. In the comics, that boundary has a name. It's called an incursion. Two universes touching and one of them breaking. Once you see that pattern, you can't unsee it. Marvel isn't just teasing that Spider-Man shows up somewhere. They're teasing that the multiverse itself is starting to fracture, and Peter might be the first named character we watch fall through the crack. So here's the real answer to why Marvel rebuilt Spider-Man before Doomsday. It was never about making room for him inside that movie. Doomsday is already stacked. The Avengers, the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, Thunderbolts, and Doctor Doom himself. Cramming a fifth Spider-Man appearance into that lineup would shrink him into a cameo, and Marvel has spent 4 films making sure this version of Peter never feels small. Instead, they built a Spider-Man complete enough to carry his own emotional weight into whatever comes after. Secret Wars, Battleworld, a fractured multiverse where every variant of every hero finally collides. Doomsday can afford to be about scale. Secret Wars needs someone the audience already loves walking in. That's why they gave him grief. That's why they gave him isolation. A villain who mirrors him. Friends who find their way back to him on their own terms, and a wound that nearly kills him before it heals him. Not because Spider-Man needed fixing. Because Marvel needed a Spider-Man sturdy enough to be the emotional center of a story bigger than anything he's faced before, and they couldn't build that hero inside a crossover. They had to build him first, alone. So he'd mean something the moment the walls between universes finally come down. That actually explains everything. The loneliness wasn't a detour from the plan. It was the plan. So here's the question worth sitting with. If Peter Parker really is drifting toward an incursion instead of a cameo in Doomsday, where do you think he lands? Drop your theory below. I want to hear which universe you think catches him first.